Masechet Nedarim, Daf Zayin. We have two topics. Amud Bet is going to be about statements that imply excommunication. And sometimes people will use a language of nidui, even though they actually mean that, not that you're excommunicated, but that I want to keep far from you, I want to have no benefit from you. And that was the statement of Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But so right now, we're continuing the theme of Yadayim, and in other topics. So we saw yesterday, we asked, is there yad for kiddushin? If I say haret mikudeshet to one woman, and then just ve'at to another woman, is she also mikudeshet? We saw regarding pe'ah, if I designate one part of a field and then just add an abbreviation, does that apply to the second part of it? And now we're going to have three more questions. We're not going to answer them regarding tzedakah, we're making something hefked, ownerless, and finally about designating a room as a bathroom, whether you can say Shema in that room. So we start. Yesh yad listaka or en yad listaka. Can you use an abbreviation when designating some money as charity? Does it work, or is it not valid? Hechi dameh. So what exactly is your question? If you're pointing to one bunch of money and you say, this money will be for tzedakah, and then you look at another a bunch of money and you say, ve'aden nami, and that coin also will be for money, for charity, then that is a full statement of tzedakah. Even though the second one is abbreviated, it comes right after the first one, and it's clear that it's a continuation. That one also is going to be tzedakah. In that case, both piles of money or both coins will be a vow that you have to give them to tzedakah. Ella, kegon damar haden, vela amar nameh, mai. But what if he just said on the first coin, he said, haden zuzah listaka, this one is for tzedakah, and the other one, he just said haden, this one. He doesn't say also. He just pulls up another coin or points to it and says, this one. So, well, what does he mean? Mai, haden nami tzedakah kama, does he mean, and this one also, and it's just a very short form. So yes, there is abbreviated forms apply to obligating oneself to charity. Or dilma mai vehaden, and then maybe when he said that one, he meant I'm going to spend it on something else. And he was not completing his statement. He was saying something else. One coin, he said, this one's going to be for tzedakah. And then he said, that one, and he had in mind, oh, I'm going to use that to buy oil. But it was not a continuation. Okay, that's the question. And here's the two sides of the considerations. Mi amrinan kevandit kash lekorbanot tichtiv beficha zo sedaka ma korbanot yesh lahen yad af sedaka yesh la yad. There is a juxtaposition. They're next to each other in a pasuk because this pasuk in Nedarim says the word beficha, and we learn that beficha is referring to tzedakah, and it's next to korbanot. So just like regarding korbanot, if I say this item is like a korban, then the yad works, or if I actually designate it as a korban, a yad works. So too for tzedakah, that would be a yad. Or maybe when we're comparing tzedakah to korban, we're only comparing it in a limited way to learn that just like if I designate a sacrifice, I have to bring it in a timely manner before 3 regalim, holidays, will pass. And that's so too tzedakah. If I donate something to tzedakah, if I promise something, then I have to pay that bill in a timely manner. Which is, by the way, an important halacha. You donate something to a charity, to a bet knesset, you do have to pay in a timely way. Okay, let's see the pasuk that we are making reference to. It's right here. It's pasuk 24. Mosa sefatecha tishmor ve'asita kasher nadarta la'Adonai Elohecha nedaba asher dibarta beficha. So the Midrash says that the word beficha refers to tzedakah. Fine, let's accept that. Well, what's the rest of the context? Pasuk 22 here, that's the pasuk we've been talking about a couple of times. And this refers to animal sacrifices. Lo tacher means you should not put it off and delay it. So that's the question regarding tzedakah, which is spoken about in this context. I know not explicitly, but nevertheless, we infer it from beficha. So are we making a full comparison? And just like regarding korban, you can make a yad, so tzedakah, an abbreviation is valid and binding. Or maybe the comparison is just that you should not delay in paying. And so tzedakah, that's it. We're just not delayed in paying, but abbreviations do not work. All right, so we leave it open-ended, and we move on to the next question. Yesh yad lehefked or dilma en yad lehefked? If I go and I say this chair, I put it out in the street, I say it's ownerless. Is that, if I say a full designation, certainly. What about an abbreviation? So we say, Hainu tzedakah, that's the same as tzedakah. Giving something to tzedakah, to the poor person, is the same as giving it to hefked, because who's going to take it? Probably a poor person, right? I'm giving it away to someone who needs it. I'm assuming if they're rich, then they're not going to have to pick up my furniture off the street. So it's the same thing, the same question. Why are you asking again about the very same item? So here's what we mean to say. We're using a if you say type of formula. If you think that abbreviations are binding regarding charity, then Shelemah, and the reason you would say that is because a juxtaposition is always full. You can't make half a juxtaposition. Once you're comparing two concepts because they're next to each other in a pasuk, then the comparison is full, right? Once you open the lines of communication, then each one's going to teach the other all of it. Therefore, abbreviations do work in both. Even if you do say that regarding charity, hefked miyamrin and hainu tzedakah, so would we assume that hefked is in fact the same? And so you're right, maybe it is the same, but not necessarily. O dilma, shane tzedakah distaka lachazya ela la'aniyim, aval hefked ben la'aniyim ben la'ashirim. Or would you say that charity is different from giving things away, making them ownerless, because charity you only give to those who are in need, whereas if making it ownerless, you never know who might take it. Could be a wealthy person will take it, right? If I give away books, or a lot of times, right, you'll see a stack of books that people put in front of their house or someplace, and anyone can take, and even a rich person will come by and say, oh, that looks like an interesting book. Yeah, they can afford to buy it, but it's right there, and right, there's no shame, and everybody would take a free book, and so sometimes things that are ownerless, even rich people would take. So it is it's a different category, not necessarily the same as charity. So would we say it's the same, and therefore we'll use the same derivation from the pasuk in Nedarim, or that pasuk is talking about charity? It's not talking about hefked. Hefked is not the same thing. All right. That's the second question. Now to the third challenge. Ba'er avina. Yesh yad lebet kiseh, hakiseh ola. If you're going to designate something as a bathroom, can you use an abbreviation? Now, why would this matter? Because you cannot say Kiryat Shema in a bathroom. Not permitted. So I didn't know if something's a bathroom or not. Well, if it's used as a bathroom, so certainly it was designated and is used as a bathroom, then for sure you cannot. We're talking about a case where you're building a new home, and you're going through the different rooms, and you say, oh, I think this should be the bathroom, and this one should be something else, right? So if just designating it would be a bathroom. Now, let's say you say this is a bathroom, but you use an abbreviation. Then is it considered a bathroom? And you can't say Shema there already from then, even before you start using it? Or is abbreviation not a valid designation? Okay, good. So we ask, if you're walking down the hallway and say, this is going to be a bathroom, and then you go to the next room and say, and this one also, well then that's obvious that you mean to continue your statement, and it's one long full statement. This is not considered an abbreviation. So certainly both of them are going to be bathrooms. By the way, we never say, a bathroom, or we always use the lashon nikiyah, bet hakiseh, the house of the chair, right? There's the chair. We don't call it a toilet room or anything like that. Okay, so Hebrew is always so beautiful. Sometimes people say the throne room. All right. Ela kegon damar vehaden velo amar name mai. If someone just said, I think it said this is a bathroom, and they said and this, but he didn't say and this also. So then is that considered that's an abbreviation. So what do we say? Haden damar v'haden nami bet hakiseh. When he says v'haden, he means and this also will be a bathroom, and so he's continuing his words. Or maybe he meant something else. He's walking by, he says, this is going to be a bathroom. And he says, and this, and he didn't finish his sentence, but in his mind he continued and said, will be a broom closet. And so we don't know what he meant. So and in that case, it would not be a bathroom, and I could go and say Shema in there. So that's the question. Now, we stop right there and say, hold on, there's a more fundamental question that we have to ask before this one. Is there zimun literally means to make a reservation? Do you have to make a reservation to use the bathroom? That's not what it means here. It means here is a designation. Before anyone actually uses it as a bathroom, if it's only designated as such, right? I'm writing on my floor plan with my architect, this is going to be a bathroom, right? And does that make it a bathroom and already prohibited, right? Does designation already make it prohibited to say Shema there, or not until I actually use it? That's the question. So you have to ask a more fundamental question. Even if I do designate it with full language, right, and I put a sign on it, this is going to be a bathroom, but I haven't used it, why are you assuming that itself would be a problem? Ravina himself, who's the one that raised this question to begin with, he also once asked this very challenge: if one designated a room to be a bet kiseh, what is its status? Can I say Shema there? So he wasn't even sure of that. He similarly asked, if he designated some place as a bathhouse, you just like you can't say Shema in a toilet room, so you can't do so in a room that's for bathing. Not appropriate. And so if you just designated it as a room for bathing, what about that? Zimun mo'il or en zimun mo'il, does designation already give it a status and you can't say Shema, or designation, it does not mean anything until someone actually uses it as such? So you see that Ravina was not even sure if designation works. And now he's asking if an abbreviation of a designation works. And the answer is yes. Ravina chada migo chada kamibaya le. He was asking one question within another question. Zimun mo'il or en zimun mo'il. First of all, does designation, is it effective? Im timsal yesh zimun, yesh yad or en yad, and if you do say that there is designation with a full statement, what about if I only use an abbreviation? Does that work or not? And this question, tiba'ele, remains unresolved. It is a question for him. This is the equivalent of teko that we find in other masechtot. In Masechet Nedarim, it says tiba'ele. So this is another example. We already saw one previously of the unusual vocabulary or terminology of Masechet Nedarim. All right, and that concludes the series of 5 items that we wonder. We know that there is abbreviation regarding korban or making something like a korban. But what about these other 5 items? And while we have both sides of the dilemma, we leave them open-ended. And I imagine that in an actual yeshiva in those times, when the students got together, they each would have to come up with arguments for and against. And this is like the heading, the exercise. And this is the prompt that the teacher gave on the test. And then the students would have to go ahead and compose arguments this way and that way. All right, now the Mishnah said, Minudeh ani lecha. If someone says, I am minudeh, which means like nidui, ostracized, excommunicated from you, what about that? Is that effectuate a type of oath that I am prohibited in to benefit from you and you from me? Or is this a language of excommunication? Not the language of a neder, like the other statements before. There is overlap between them in that if someone is excommunicated, they are not allowed to benefit, and you may not benefit. You can't give any benefit to them. You can't invite them over to your house. You can't invite them to your wedding. Can't give them an aliyah, right? You can't give them any benefit. So there is some overlap, but it's a different mechanism. So the question, if I say minudeh, do I mean, like if I say, you're far from me, do I mean that, do I mean it in as a mechanism of oath? Amar Abaye, Modeh Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah says, Chochech. He struggled with it and he ended up being stringent. Okay. Modeh Rabbi Akiva l'inyan malkot she'eno loked. Im ken nitneh Rabbi Akiva machmir. So Abaye explains that while Rabbi Akiva struggled with it and he said we should be stringent, he wasn't actually stringent regarding a punishment. If someone would say minudeh ani lecha, and then he would have benefit, go ahead and take benefit from him and eat his food, while normally for a regular neder, if someone violated a full neder, he would get malkut, lashes. In this case, he would not get lashes because he's not sure. If he said, if Rebbe Akiva wanted to say get lashes, he should say machmir. He's stringent. He considers nidui like an oath, so therefore you get lashes. But he didn't say that. He's chochech. So therefore, that means that he's not sure. Don't violate the oath, but you're not going to get lashes for it. Amara Papa. Nadena minach likula amala pilige de asur. Mishamat na minach likula ama share. Now Papa is going to give us the range. It's always good to test things with the more extreme cases to see what exactly is the question at stake. If someone says nadena minach, nadena is like from the same language as nida. Nida means someone who is kept far away. Right, a man and a woman, when she's nida, they have to separate from each other. See, she is sent away or distanced. So the word nadena could just mean distance. And if you say the word nadena, even though it's also the same root as nidui, but it doesn't have the particular form of nidui, so everybody would agree nadena, that would make a neder prohibition, and you can't benefit from each other. Mishamat naminach, that shamta, that is an official language of excommunication, and everyone would agree that would not create a neder, and that would not create a prohibition. So that would be fine, because that's only used for a language of excommunication. It's not used for languages of I'm prohibited to you. So b'may so what is in fact the machloket here? Be'menudeh ani lecha. If he says menudeh, which is a language of nidui, of excommunication, but it does have a possible meaning of like nida, so it's an ambiguous term. Rabbi Akiva sabar lishna de niduyahu. Rabbi Akiva said it sounds like it means a vow. But Rabbanan sabre lishna de meshamatnahu. Rabbanan say it sounds more like excommunication. So if it sounds more like a vow, just right, like you would say nida. Then it's an effective oath. Whereas according to Rabbanan, it means shamot. It only means excommunication, and so it does not express a vow of prohibition. That's where the question is. All right, all that was according to Rav Papa. That was his interpretation. However, Rav Chisda has a different interpretation of where the machloket is. Upeligad Rav Chisda that so Rav Papa would disagree with Rav Chisda. Tahu Gavrat Amar Meshamatna benichse debere de Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. There was a certain case where a man came and said, I am excommunicated from the property of the son of Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. I'm making a vow that he's not going to have any benefit from his property. Now he used the word meshamatna, which normally just means excommunicated, and that would not make a vow of prohibition. If anything, that might excommunicate the other guy, but he's not excommunicating the person. He's saying, excommunicated from the property. So you can't excommunicate property. So it wouldn't have any effect if it's actually an excommunication. You can excommunicate oneself. We'll see in a few minutes. So this would have zero meaning if it meant excommunication. The question is, does it mean a vow of prohibition? And so would that person be prohibited from the property, or not? They asked Rav Chisda, Marle, let dechashla leha de Rabbi Akiva. And his response was, nobody worries about the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, we follow Chachamim. Meaning that we don't worry about Rabbi Akiva, who considers such language to be like a vow and prohibited. He is stringent. Rather, we follow Chachamim that this is only a language of excommunication, and therefore is not binding, has no validity. What do we see here? From the fact that he applied Rabbi Akiva, even though he said we don't follow Rabbi Akiva, but his interpretation of Rabbi Akiva is that Rabbi Akiva is talking about even the language of Mishamatna. So Kafam Kasabar Mishamatna Pelige. Therefore, see, according to Rav Chisda, the argument between Rabbi Akiva, who's Machmir, and Chachamim, who are Mekel, is not only with that in-between language of Menudeh Ani Lecha, that's where it's ambiguous language, and it's not unlike Rav Papa, who thinks that if it was Meshamatna, everyone would agree that that's the language of excommunication and be machmir, even in Chachamim. No, Rav Chisda does not think, because in this case he used the word meshamatna, and he said, I'm not following Rabbi Akiva. So it means Rabbi Akiva would prohibit in that if he said meshamatna, but Chachamim would not. So the machloket is even regarding the word mishamatna, which is more clear. So Rav Chisda puts the machloket in a different place than Rav Papa does. All right. Amar Rabbi Ila Amar Rav. Nidahu befanav en matirin lo ela befanav. Nidahu shelo befanav matirin lo ben befanav ben shelo befanav. And since we mentioned talking about excommunication, here's some laws of excommunication. Good to know. You never know when you might have to use them. If someone was excommunicated in front of his face, then when they undo it, right? It's not forever. Person, did some sin, and that requires excommunication. When he makes teshuvah, we undo it. But if it's done in front of his face, then you have to undo it also in his presence. Whereas if the sages got together and they declared an nidui not in front of him, then they would also undo it not in front of him. This is like Elisha Acher. The rabbis got together and made nidui, and then they sent someone to tell to Rabbi Akiva, they sent him to tell Acher, the sages, they just made nidui against you. Okay, what is the reason? Several are offered. I think that's the best reason is that this is similar to, if you embarrass someone in public to his face, then you have to apologize also in public to his face. Whereas if it's a private matter, then you can apologize privately. The idea is that nidui in front of him not only excommunicates him, it also is a public shaming. And so once they make teshuvah, you want to undo the public shaming by taking it off of him and saying, okay, now you don't deserve to be shamed anymore. So if it's in front of him, then the undoing should also be in front of him. Whereas if it's not in front of him, then he didn't have that public shaming, so then you don't have to undo that part of it. Amar Rav Chanin Amar Rav, Hashomeh hazkarat Hashem mepi chavero, tzarich lenado tov im lo nidau hu atzmo yeheh b'nidui. If you hear someone say God's name in vain, then you have to put him in excommunication. And if you don't, then you yourself will be excommunicated. You see from here that nidui is not only done by a bet din, but you can also have a private citizen, like a citizen's arrest. Right? A person can go, says, I am putting you in nidui. What did you just say? You're not allowed to say Hashem's name in vain. And the reason why it's so important is because anytime Hashem's name is said in vain, then poverty will enter that place. And so we don't want that to happen, so we got to make sure to stop it in its tracks. And furthermore, the devastation of poverty can be like death. Shelemah ki metu kol hanashim v'tanya kol makom shenatu chamim enehem o mita o oni. How do we know that poverty is like death? We learn it from the pasuk in Shemot, where Moshe is told, listen, you can go back to Egypt because those people who were trying to kill you are gone. And so now they are dead. Are dead. So therefore, Moshe, you're unsafe, right? When Moshe killed the Egyptian, so then there was a death warrant on him. He had to run away to Midian. Now those people are dead. Now, who were those people? They're not named, but the Midrash says it is Datan v'Aviram. Now, Datan v'Aviram, if it's actually them, did not die, because we see they come up in stories later. So, what do you mean, Metu? All the people died that wanted to kill Moshe? Some of them were still alive. So, rather, it can't mean that literally they died. It must mean something else happened to them. And poverty, when someone's so impoverished, they can't find their next meal, there's no life like that. So it's like death. Furthermore, Braita says, when any time the sages set their eyes on a person disrespected them, did something wrong, then you knew what was coming. Either the person would die or they become impoverished. Right? A lot of stories in the Talmud, when there's someone that says something disrespectful to a sage, you know the next line is going to be that he turned into a pile of dust, or a snake bit him, or something like that. But it could also be that they just became impoverished, which is comparable to death, and therefore one should keep away from saying Hashem's name in vain. Amar Rabbi Abba, Hava kaimna kamed Rav Huna, shema'a lehach iteta de'apeka, hazkarat Hashem lebatala. So one time I was in front of Rav Huna, and he heard a woman say Hashem's name in vain. So what did he do? Shamta ushra la le'atar be'apa. So he excommunicated her. As we just saw, you have to do that. But it didn't last a long time. I guess she was embarrassed. She realized her mistake. And so he undid it immediately in front of her. So that's a nice little story. And we can learn a lot of things from this story. Shema mina telat, 3 things. Shema mina shema eskarat Hashem epicha v'rosa richan. Number 1, if someone says Hashem's name in vain, you got to excommunicate them. Right there on the spot. Furthermore, since in the story it emphasizes that he undid the excommunication immediately in front of her, right? So he wanted to make sure that she was still there, because since he excommunicated in front of her and caused her that embarrassment, but she made teshuvah, she realized her mistake, so now he undoes it also in front of her. And the last lesson is that there is no time difference there's no time delay necessary between the excommunication and the undoing of the excommunication. One can excommunicate just for a few seconds and undo it immediately, right? Because that's all. The point is that you should have to excommunicate. They did something deserving of it, but it doesn't have to last a long time. As soon as they learn their lesson, it can be done with. All right, we're going to start off with a series of statements by Rav Gidel Amar Rav. It's going to go on to the next page, but we'll just see the first one that is relevant to excommunication. Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav, Tamid Chacham menadeh la'atzmo u'mefer la'atzmo. A Torah scholar can excommunicate himself and undo his own excommunication. Interesting. Pishita. Isn't this obvious? Well, I don't know if I would have thought of that, but it's obvious. Seems obvious, because why not? I might have thought not so, because a prisoner cannot free himself from prison. I guess you can you can lock yourself in a room, but once you're locked in, you can't get yourself out. And excommunication is kind of like locking yourself. You're separating yourself from everyone. You are right in the cell, and therefore how can you get yourself out? You need someone from the outside to pull you out. This is also the reason why so other people should pray for a person when they're sick. It's hard for the person themselves when they're sick. They're in jail. You need another person to pull them out. That's the Gemara Barachot. Okay, so Kamash Malan, therefore we learn that no, that's not the same. It's true, a person in jail can't get themselves out, but a person excommunicated can undo the excommunication. Hechidame, what would be a case? Why would anyone excommunicate themselves and then take them out? Maybe if they did something so bad, there was no one else around, they said Hashem's name in vain, they realized, oh, I'm going to excommunicate myself. Fine, but why would you put yourself in and then take yourself out? For example, Mor Zutra Chasida, if there was some student that required excommunication, so he felt bad to do it. He was a nice teacher, and he didn't want the person to feel too bad that he's getting excommunicated. Maybe it was a relatively, first-time offense. And so here's what he would do. He would excommunicate himself first, because misery loves company, and you could break the news more easily if I'm in the same position and I come and say, oh, listen, I'm excommunicated. So I know how you feel, but listen, you're excommunicated too. And then, so then he would go excommunicate the student. And then when he went home, he would unexcommunicate himself, and he would unexcommunicate the student as well. So it didn't last a long time, less than a day, and the student would get the lesson, and then he would unexcommunicate both of them. But you see here, he would do that not because he was deserving. Moses was not deserving of anything negative, but rather in order to share more easy, in order to break the news more easily. So that's why he did that, and that is a way that is permitted to do. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen, Amen.